7, you just,
All of these side ones here.
but you're official now, so. Welcome to.
Yeah, I'm Craig. Great. Hey. Okay. I just wanted to tell you, I'm going to be making an announcement to Brent that there is actually a provision.
You know, I went to pick up my husband.
You actually have the right. So my point being is you don't need to waste time fighting for something that you already have. We did not, with the entire code change. You know what I'm saying? So we didn't know about the way that provision was.
Are you guys gonna have all the A's again?
Did we put, yeah, so Andrea and Andy.
I know,
All
so
right.
you're going by Andrew, right?
However,
It's a little bit.
if you go by Andrew, maybe you better say Andy. I usually go by Andy. Unless I'm in trouble.
Then it's Andrew and whatever your middle name is.
That's right, Andrew Lynn, that's right. Yes.
I told him, I said, I promise you he's not getting your emails.
Adam, Andrea, and Andy. Hey.
All together.
Great. Oh my gosh.
I don't know, so
Better write this down here.
I'll make sure he's got the right email. I just wanted to let you know. Because he still wants to have lunch with you.
Yes, I want to go with him as well.
They talked to the council.
Next week I'm out.
You know where?
You might be.
Yeah, James Dustin.
They asked the council about it last week. Like, Adam, was up for reappointment? Everyone on the council good? Oh, yes, good. Has anybody talked to Adam about it? No, can you ask Adam first?
It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, because you've already done what you're watching.
Okay, we got Andy, Andrea,
Andrea.
and Adam. Oh my gosh. Can I just go A1,
A's.
A2, A3?
Sure.
Whatever you want to do.
What's that?
You guys are gonna get me all tongue tied here. Just write it down.
Why is this doing this?
Why is it doing what? Showing us on screen?
I like how delayed it is. Watch.
Why is it displaying here and not over here?
There we go. That was weird. Which one do you got? Yeah, I guess. Yep. That's
Okay, everyone ready? All right. I'd like to welcome everyone out to our Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, July 19th. We do have a full quorum tonight. Let's go ahead with the Pledge of Allegiance by Jim Dostal.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Go ahead and have approval for the minutes on June 7th, 2018.
I'd like to make a motion for the approval of the minutes for June 7th.
Okay, motion by Andy
Second.
and a second by Lauren. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that is approved. Thank you. All right. Is there any conflicts of interest on tonight's agenda? Okay, let's go ahead and move on. We'll go ahead and go to 2.1. This is for a subdivision amendment for a lot line adjustment. Bryn?
All right. So as you said, this is a subdivision plat amendment for a lot line adjustment. See the property here, 2 properties on Cedar Butte Drive, well, Cedar Butte Drive and Cedar Butte Circle. They are proposing to move the lot line, just like you can see here, just a minuscule amount to the south between these two properties. And you can see, kind of blew it up here, and you can see what they're basically doing is adjusting it to where the fence line is. And just moving that property line down a little bit. And though that's the recommendation, staff recommends approval. Pretty straightforward lot line adjustment. Any questions?
All right, is the applicant here tonight? All right, if you wouldn't mind coming to the mic and stating your name for the record.
My name is Jeff Tobler.
Okay, is there any additional information you'd like to give to us?
No, that's pretty much my contractor that put in the fence. He did it right on the west side of my property, and which was fine. But when he came to the east side of my property, he was over 8 feet. So it's like a pie slice that's there. My neighbor said that he has a big enough lot as it is, and so he signed off on it. We're both in agreement, and so we just need to make the changes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Is there any questions for the applicant? All right, you can go ahead and take a seat. Thank you.
And do what?
You can go ahead and take a seat. It looks like there's no questions. Okay. Discussion, make a motion. Seems pretty easy.
Yeah. Do we need anything written from the neighbor? Do we need any written notification from the neighbor to say, yeah, I agree, or?
The application already was signed by the neighbor, correct?
Yeah.
He'll also have to sign off on the plat in order for it
They'll
to
both
actually
have to
happen.
sign the plat.
Okay.
I can't make a motion.
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve item 2.1, the subdivision amendment for a lot line adjustment.
Okay, motion by Andy.
I'll second it. Oh, go
Second
for
by
it.
Andrea.
You beat me.
All right, Adam,
Yes.
Andrea,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
and Perry.
Yes.
And that motion passes. All right, item 2.2. This is an exception to the single-family design standards for a proposed dome house.
All right. So this is, as you stated, we have single-family design standards. They are allowed to ask for an exception, and that comes to the Planning Commission. Property is located on Herriman View Way up in Fort Herriman Cove. It's right here. It's almost an acre of property. So a single-family house is a permitted use as long as it complies with the ordinance. Because this one does not comply with all the single-family design standards, again, that's why it is coming to you. The main exception that they're really asking for is the roof pitch. Again, they're asking, they'd like to build a dome-shaped home, which does not meet the minimum 512 roof pitch. Again, you can see in H, the Planning Commission can approve deviations basis on the finding that the architectural style proposed provides compensating design features. So that's what you need to be able to find, is that there's the compensating design features. I've got all the images from the applicant. I can go through them, or we may want to have the applicant kind of come up and explain what he wants to do. That might be the best way to kind of to go through the images if you'd like to do it that way.
Okay. All right, any questions for Bryn? All right, is the applicant here tonight? If you wouldn't mind stating your name for the record?
My name is Jim Dostal, and it does not meet the exact requirements of a 512 pitch on 17% of the roof. 83% of it does. So I don't know where we start on this proposition, whether that's the real issue or whether it's just that it's a dome. That is the item in question. What are your questions on the matter?
How about you walk us through kind of these renderings that you got and kind of explain what your plans are for this property?
Well, there is a number of issues that are related to any exception. One is the suitability of the structure for this area. And this area backs up to open range, and in the time that we've owned the property, which is 19 years, it has burned several times. So there are two Well, I designed this house with several things in mind. One is the unique needs of our family, and two is the unique problems or characteristics of the particular lot we're building on. And so one of these are the hazards there. First is range fire hazard, and second is earthquake.
That's a lot.
This house doesn't burn. It's made of reinforced concrete, and there is nothing on it to burn. It actually provides a fire barrier against any range fire coming from the open space into that neighborhood. So that's item number one. Item number two is the reinforced concrete construction, partly because of the geometry, is very strong. And on this unique lot where we have solid granite 5 feet below the surface, we'll be able to set the foundations right on bedrock, and the structure will withstand the forces of a 9.0 earthquake, which is something that can happen in this valley. So those are some of my criteria for why I want to build it in this style. They're engineering structural issues, and I'm flexible on the aesthetic part of it, but I think I've drawn up a sketch that looks good to me. It's pretty. It matches the curvature of the surrounding hills, and I'd like to build with natural materials there. There are a couple of different kinds of stone native to the site, a gray granite that's below the surface, and then a red volcanic tuff that's scattered all over the surface, and thousands of boulders of various sizes. Using part of it would be a stucco finish in a tan that would match the color of the mountain most of the time. Other criteria, the homes around it. There are half a dozen more vacant lots down this side of the street backing up to the open space. And with the similar issues of bedrock underneath, this can be a model demonstrating how to build on those kind of lots, structures that are appropriate for the environment and not a concern about fire hazard. I think that pretty well summarizes what I'm proposing. It meets all the other requirements, 40% stone on the face, et cetera, et cetera. It's intended to be a model home for the 21st century with solar electric, solar heating, geothermal cooling right into the bedrock, rainwater capture, gray water capture for irrigating the garden terraces behind the house. It's been a dream home that I've been wanting to build for quite a number of years, and it looks like maybe I'm finally getting around to it. So, but I wanted to have a preliminary review before I started spending any money on it. I didn't want to go get all the plans done, all the architectural drawings and final plans, and then come in here and you say, oh, you can't build that here. So let's get the questions out in the open, if there are any, and then I can get busy to going to work on it.
Where's the garage going to be? The garage?
The garage?
Uh-huh.
Okay. The design of this sits instead of cutting into the granite like they did the house right next door, it sets it on top of the bedrock. That elevates it a bit, and so the driveway comes in at the high side of the lot, wraps around the house, gaining elevation, going past a basement level and an RV garage on the basement level, wraps around the back of the house to the parking garage, double garage, on the main living level. Now, at my age, I worry about barrier-free access, and so this has barrier-free access, no steps, first to the basement level, then to the main level, and a third level above, a little extra room up there actually comes out the back of the house and meets the slope of the hillside about 20 feet behind the house on a little wall. So did that answer the question? Mm-hmm. There are two garages, one big one. I'm a retired automotive engineer, and I've got to have a shop. And so I built that big enough so that the next owner of the house, whoever that is, could park his full bus-sized RV in there, or shoot baskets in there, or play tennis, or whatever he wants to. But for me, it's my shop. The parking garage is on the main level, accessed from the rear. The front door is actually at the rear of the house.
Okay.
I had a question. How do you plan to meet the current energy codes?
Oh,
How do you plan to meet current energy codes with this construction type?
Energy codes. Well, this is a very energy efficient design. First of all, the spherical shape has a minimal surface area per unit volume. It'll have 6 inches of foam insulation on the outside of the concrete. The present house that we live in, and that picture was in your packet too, down in Springville, is built on the same design. It's only got 2 inches of foam on the outside, and we don't use air conditioning. Except the last couple of weeks we plugged in a window unit because this 100 degrees eventually heats the place up. That's why I'm going to more insulation. That's something I've learned by living in this house. In every way, it's an energy efficient structure.
So spray foam with what type of finish then on the exterior? Is it?
It'll actually be a styrofoam with a stucco, 3/4 inch stucco over the top of that.
Okay, an IFAS system or just traditional stucco, kind of a Portland cement or?
Yeah, it's a cement stucco, yeah.
Okay.
And that is sufficient protection that fire can't get to the foam. The foam won't burn, but it can melt down if it gets hot. That 3/4 of an inch of cementitious stucco on the outside precludes that. One of my favorite pictures on that subject is from a fire in California a few years ago. Yes, here it is. And you can pass that. A neighborhood of very nice houses, which all burned to the ground except the one that has 3/4 of an inch of stucco, tile roof, nothing on the outside to catch fire. So it actually, my contention is that on that side of that street, back up against the open empty space, or the open space.
Do you mind speaking into the mic so they can get it recorded? Thank you.
On the south side of the street where it backs up against the open space, I would contend that traditional frame structure is inappropriate for all the houses on that side of the street.
So you mentioned that this particular home had some type of, shingle on top. Are you looking at anything like that? What about maintenance, long-term maintenance of that stucco, leaking, things like that for that type of facility?
Well, actually, stucco stands up pretty well to weather. I don't anticipate any issues with that. We've got stucco houses all over the place, usually with a much thinner coat, like 1/4 of an inch. That heavier stucco will be reinforced with chicken wire. It can't go anywhere. Much more durable than conventional roof, and it does not burn like asphalt shingles will.
Can you describe what in this photo we're looking at, is that a decorative flare out that's happening or?
Oh, okay. The structure is basically 2 hemispheres, and the main living hemisphere, the tallest one, 4 sides of it are octagonal in shape because I'd like to have the windows flat. I don't want to be curving glass. So where these octagonal vertical surfaces meet the dome, there's that little bit of an eyebrow, a little bit of a hiccup that comes out there to meet the vertical surface at the top of the arch. On the garage part, that's actually quite an extension out there, several feet. I wanted to get it out far enough so I'd have a 40-foot long space that would accommodate a full-size RV.
So for me, with seeing what you proposed, I can understand it. I do have some concerns. In order for us to typically approve this type of exception, we have to have a lot more data as far as materials, color boards, all kinds of, I think even one time we talked about window type and glass type. When we deviate from our exceptions, I personally think we need to have a lot more, especially with this product being a lot different than the typical housing type. So especially what betterments, Bryn articulated it better than I am going to, but
The architectural style provides compensating design features.
yes, and so I would really like to go through, before I'm comfortable approving anything, and I'm still really concerned, I think we need to hear what those architectural style improvements are that compensate for the design feature deviation. So I think those need to be documented by an engineer or an architect. And again, I don't know the energy code, but that'll obviously need to be talked about. You did say that you had a lot of energy efficient concepts you want to bring to the design, which I appreciate, but I think that would, if anything, that would help offset and maybe justify more, but I need to see more than what you're just saying. I would need to see that by a comprehensive report or tied to the approval of this. And so I'm not comfortable, me personally, I'm not comfortable at this time doing it without that information. Making a motion for
Tell
approval.
me exactly what kind of information you want.
I don't know right now.
Makes it hard for me to provide it, yeah.
So I'll be honest, a lot of those would be the energy efficiency would be a big one for me. The longevity would be a big one for me. The material construction, the detailed material. I mean, we before this meeting, we looked at a church that's been built several times in our community, and we were looking at colors boards. The all of the proposed amenities that you're proposing with solar power, geothermal, so on and so forth, and why that is a betterment to allow for the deviation. Those are what I would say, just me kind of rattling. Again, that's just me, so you guys can go ahead and chime in if you agree or disagree with me.
I had a couple other questions. So how much square footage will this be as far as actual living environment?
The
How many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, living environment type? How much square footage?
Well, I plan to leave the basement unfinished initially, which could be finished up into extra bedrooms or a big family room or whatever. But it will be my shop space while I'm building the place, my cabinet shop and all of that. We would be finishing the main level, which is about 1,700 square feet, and the upstairs, which is 600 more. So it'd be about 2,300 square feet of living space out of the total 5,000, everything including the garages.
So the 5,000 includes the garages as well. So you're
Yeah.
saying 2,300 current finished, and then the garages, and then how much of your unfinished basement then? What's your square footage of the unfinished?
There's another 1,700 in
So
the
it'd be
basement.
even- Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
So I think that delineated on a plan would be appropriate. I know you gave us your schematic and things like that, but I personally think those all need to be either engineered or architecturally put on plans to ensure that it's what can be achieved.
So just to try to clarify, this is my first time on the Planning Commission, was recently appointed. Essentially, you're asking for a full set of details so we can look at the full scope of the project, all the details involved, as you said, those additional architectural features that offset the deviation, and then approve it as a packet of, here's all the information, here's the plan, we're approving what we've been presented as far as all those details.
Correct, and if you
Rather
go,
than just assuming that, hey, this project will turn out okay based on some concepts and ideas, rather we want to not give approval until we have a full picture.
to be consistent, that is our intent, because, or at least my intent, because in the past, on every approval that I voted for, we tied it to a reason. I remember one that was, they wanted no masonry, but we went with a special kind of wood, and justified the window types and the material of those windows. So I think you need to bring all that if you would like the approval for an exception from me.
Now, I think that that's what I plan to bring to, for application for a building permit. But I didn't want to go and spend all the money on the engineering and detailed plans until we had the basic concept understood. So that would be my proposal, and I've lined up an architect that licensed in the state of Utah who's built these domes all over the place, who is very competent in that field. And when it comes to the time of a building permit, I would have that all under the stamp of a professional engineer. But if you can tell me exactly what you need, I can get it for you.
Additionally, for this one, because of the drastic architectural, and this is more for staff, I do believe that in fairness to the community around it, the landowners do need to be notified.
Agreed.
Of this proposed system.
Yeah, has there been any discussions with your neighbors? You know, you got one right next door that's already built. Any discussions? Are they familiar with the plans or anything like that already, what your intent is here?
No, I haven't discussed it with the neighbors.
Now, Adam, do you also want a materials board brought in? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
For something to this level where it's nothing we've seen before,
Right.
I would say
I
yes.
just want to make sure that's,
Materials board, architectural, and again, I know that you want to try and save and not spend that money right now, and I totally understand that. However, I still don't know if I'm comfortable even with all of that. Looking at the sketch, it's interesting to me, and I'd like to see how the materials and colors and all come together. But I don't know where I will stand even at the end, to be honest. I'm just trying to give you full disclosure from my opinion.
Right. Okay.
But I definitely know right now there's not enough for me to say yes, is what I'm trying to say.
And I would concur with that as well. This is in a location, I'm sure it's going to be pretty predominant. You know, up on the hillside, lots of folks are going to be able to see this, and so there's a lot of things that we're going to have to, better renderings, you know, a lot more detail to even consider. Again, for me, approval of something of this nature.
I have come equipped with a whole flock of domes that are built, which obviously have been approved somewhere.
Sure.
A number of them in the state of Utah and a number of them scattered around the world. As far as permanence, my favorite dome in that connection is the Pantheon at Rome, a 120-foot diameter concrete dome that's been standing there for 2,000 years. All these questions have answers, so I'm prepared to answer some of them tonight.
And this is a unique setting too. So yeah, up on the hillside is going to be predominant. So
I think we really need you to highlight, and I'll read it. We may approve the deviation from one or more of the development or architectural standards, providing this section on the basis of a finding that architectural style proposed provides compensating design features. So I think we need to have you address what those are so that we can have a reason to deviate from our. I don't see those right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, another thing I can do is just put a little dunce cap on the top of the dome so that all of the roof is greater than a 512 pitch. Would that make you happy? Or would we still have questions? 17% of the roof, where it rounds off at the top, is less than 512. I could put a little point on that, and it would all be greater than 512 and technically meet all the standards. Would that be sufficient, or would you still have questions about approving it?
Still have questions.
I don't
know.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm not looking at 40% of the exterior is brick or stone. I don't know. I still personally would have questions, but I don't know if you I guess you could make it fit our standards.
Yeah, and if you like some more stone, we can compute exactly how much. I can wrap some more stone around it. I'm good with that. I'm flexible on the surface decoration.
If that's the case, I don't know that you would even come to us as a board. So I'm just saying for me to deviate from this for the current proposal. So I do think you need more. And those energy efficiencies, like I said, do give some validation why it may be beneficial to compensate for the design features. But I think just listing them off is not sufficient for me. I think we need to have them documented of what your plan is. So that's me. Like I said, at this time, I'm not comfortable approving, but I'm happy to continue until the applicant can provide us that information.
Okay.
Agreed.
Maybe one question for Bryn. Would there, I don't know if there might be a requirement to see how this might affect the neighbors economically. I don't know if there's a way to have the realtor do a study to say, here's how homes around non-traditional construction sell, basically would it affect the value of the neighbors' houses? So I don't know if there's a way to have a realtor do a study on that.
Yes, well, I'd expect this thing, when it's finished, to appraise in the neighborhood of all of the surrounding houses. They're sort of in the 500 to 800 bracket in that neighborhood. Of course, I don't have an official document of that until I have the engineer do the whole thing, including the cost estimate.
They'll probably praise it that much. Just looking at this one, the cost is going to be higher than the neighbors. But
how does that affect the neighbors?
how does it affect the neighbors?
Right.
Is my
Because it is non-traditional. It's kind of,
Right.
you know, yeah, even though it's a higher value home, how does that affect the values of the homes adjacent to it as well? Because it is a non-traditional.
I would think it would add variety and interest to the neighborhood.
And that's, you know, that's agreed for your opinion, but it may be somebody else's opinion. May be detrimental.
So how
to
do I
their
address that?
Well, that's the comment, right?
That's my question.
That's the question. How
If
can
we could have a realtor,
We can see if we can find, we can talk to some people.
yeah, if we can find a realtor that can give us an analysis of how it might affect houses around. As far
How
as-
would we go about doing that?
So they'll look into it. Bryn and the
Staff will
staff
work
will
with you.
look into
Okay.
it, yes.
And I think another part of that, though, too, is we, you know, full disclosure, if there's some way we can get the neighbors, you know,
Yeah.
the knowledge of this, that would also
It being
help.
non-traditional.
Yeah.
Should I carry a petition around the neighborhood
No,
and have
not at
people
all.
sign it off?
No, I think the city can help us with that as
They'll
well.
mail.
They can do a notification.
notifications out to neighbors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bryn, do you have any concern with what we've said so far?
No.
Okay. I did think of
Got a big list, so.
I do know of one house that was built with similar features. It's not a dome house, but similar features of all of these types of, it's up in Centerville.
Mhm.
Trying to think, it's kind of up against the mountain. I want to say it was 15 years ago, and I know it was over $1 million to build it. So it's very expensive construction, but, you know, how does it affect the neighbors? And that might be a house we could look to see if that is affecting the neighbors around it. That might be,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if that.
If you can tell me where it's at, I'd like to go look at it myself.
Yeah, I could look it up on Google Earth maybe after the meeting, but it's up in Centerville along the highway, that's
Okay.
against the mountain.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
I don't have any.
Okay. All right, is there anything else you'd like to address to us before they make a motion?
I think again, I can show you pictures of domes that have been built and that it's an established building technique. Some houses, some of the most ones you're probably familiar with are larger structures like the municipal buildings at Price, 250-foot domes that house the city offices there. They've been there for 25 years now. We'd certainly get a recommendation from them on the durability, the maintainability, and the energy efficiency.
Be another great asset for your tool to present to us.
Okay. So, yeah, tell me exactly what you need, and I'll get it for you.
Okay, they'll put that in the motion. All right, thank you.
Okay.
And today I forgot my pen. All right. I'd like to make a motion.
All right.
I move to continue item 2.2 without date, so the applicant can bring back a architectural plan, an analysis of the home values for non-traditional home in the areas,
Or how it affects the
how it
neighbors or
affects
the neighbors.
notifying that the city would notify the neighbors before it comes back. The applicant to provide information for the compensating design features for geothermal design, bring back a color board, bring back architectural design, true schematic to ensure that it can be achieved, as well materials board, and for the applicant to provide compensating design features for why we would go to this design, as well as additionally, since the applicant asked, to bring in historic dome structure information regionally in Utah, and the maintenance, betterments, and features.
All right, so that is motion to continue by Adam. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Lauren. Harry?
Aye.
Lauren?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Geez, too many A's down here. Andy?
Yes.
Andrew? Andrea?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And Adam?
Yes.
All right, and that motion is continued.
Who did that?
You guys can't do that to me.
We just sit where we're told.
Oh, man. Okay. So before we go to item 3, which is our legislative items, we do have 2 public hearings on tonight, so I'm just gonna go through this. Public hearing policy and procedure. The purpose of public hearings is to allow citizens to address items on the agenda. Citizens requesting to address the commission will be asked to complete a written comment form and present it to Wendy Thorpe, our deputy recorder. In general, the chair will allow an individual 3 minutes to address the commission. A spokesperson recognized as representing a group in attendance may be allowed up to 5 minutes. And this policy applies to all public hearings. So, let's get to item 3.1, which is a text change to the Land Development Code to create an accessory sculptures chapter. Bryn.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Item 3.1. This one, we've talked a couple times during work meetings about the accessory code ordinance. It's fragmented across all of our ordinance in Title 10. So what we think is a good idea is to put it all into one chapter of its own where it's easily found for everybody. Anybody all the residents or others who need to look up the code can find it in one simple place instead of wondering, oh, but is there another section that overrides it or that contradicts it or and I'll give you a great example of this. This happened to me today. I had a resident call in saying he wanted a metal structure on his property in the R150 or R121 zone rather. And our understanding at the time, up until today, was that it was not in the ordinance anymore that they could do that, and it was relegated just to the agricultural zones. But after his phone call, I just started getting a little bit more curious, so I paged through a bunch of code again, and sure enough, I found it, just implemented in a different way. So my point being is that's the fragmentation I'm talking about. So the version you have in front of you tonight is not meant to be a final version. It's not meant for you to act upon it tonight. It's meant to be the best starting off point. It's supposed to represent how our ordinance is today, with the exception of what I just told you about the metal structures that I just found out about. So that is not in there tonight. I will put that in there for the next time, certainly by the time that you would be considering taking any action on it. Unless, of course, you directed me not to, but I assume you'd be okay with me doing that. So anyway, this is taking, we talked in both couple meetings about how to handle exceptions. Under the advisement, we've had long discussions between Bryn and Mike and myself, and we've decided to go forward by just putting what's in the code now. We're not taking, in this version, no exceptions are being taken into account. There is no way really for anybody to ask for an exception either. So what we're kind of recommending, it was also, I think it was in the staff report, but we're recommending also then that some provision be used to allow for potential exceptions in the future. That would be done through a different application, a different file, and it would come through this entire process again, completely separate of this code that's in front of you. So that way we could focus just on the difficult nature of different, exceptions. But as for tonight, this is just our base jumping off point for, here's the code represented as it is today in our current ordinance. Now you can see it in a much more comprehensive way, all kind of put together so it's a lot easier to read. You've got one large table and you've got one and a quarter pages of wording. It's almost nothing. So let's see what you like about it, what you hate about it, what changes you want. And you can just take public comment. That's a great thing to do, and then see if that's something you want to start implementing into any potential changes. So that's really all we've got right now.
Thank you. All right, any questions? Okay, so this is on for a public hearing. So anybody wishing to make comment, please come to the mic and state your name for the record. And then the forms are in the back to have you fill out.
On this.
Okay.
I actually have approached Craig about this.
State your name.
Would
Oh,
you
sorry,
please?
I'm Zach Bevan.
Okay, thank you.
I approached him about building a garage, and my plot doesn't meet the standards for my garage I want to build is technically in front of my house, but it's not. It is and it isn't. I don't know if you guys want to, oh, that's my lot right there. Yep. I've kind of placed a...
We've talked about your lot.
I've placed a garage on there to see what the block, my house, there's a and kind of a simple sketch of where it would
Thank you.
Sorry. And on my original plans, I had it from the city. I had a detached garage on the plans when I built the home, thinking that it could always be there. And I approached for a permit, and I was told that I couldn't. So and everything I've done so far, you can see the landscaping and everything I've done is in thought that I could have a garage there.
So just to be clear on this section, we're not necessarily approving or disapproving the specific, and this would be under some sort of exception either way.
He is just basically saying this is something he would like an exception process to have the ability to implement. So nothing you do tonight allows him to do anything or to not do anything, nor does anything you do tonight change the code. It just allows you to consider what changes you might be open to making if you think this is worthy of some type of change to the ordinance or an exception.
Okay.
And that's up to you as well.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to make comment tonight? Okay, we will go ahead and close the public hearing on this item.
So Jessica, let me just point out on this one. The ordinance doesn't say you can't have a building in your front yard. It says if it's in the front yard, you have to meet the same setbacks as a home.
So it has to be set back
So in
25
this case,
feet.
it'd have to be set back 25 feet from this property line clear back here, basically.
Okay,
So that's really, again, kind of the exception that we would want to look at
Right.
in some situations.
Yeah.
Where, and again, it is, we talked about it, which is why we didn't bring you an ordinance with an exception, because there was no way to write one. So we wanted to get this part done first. It's gonna be difficult to figure out how to craft an exception and what those standards would be and what times you would allow it. But again, you can look at this and go, yeah, on this lot, it may make sense to say you can only do 8 feet on that side or whatever instead of 25.
right.
But that's, so again, that's
But that's not in the language now.
not in
So-
here. Today, he could put it there, but it would have to be, like I said, set back 25 feet from this front property line.
Yeah. I understand this difficult.
So it's
One.
yeah.
I love the table, and I think it's very beneficial, so much easier to see what I want, what I'm concerned with. So thank you for putting that together. So I personally have a couple of things that I'd like you to consider.
On the ordinance?
On
Go
the
for it.
ordinance. I personally think, and I get that you captured it a little bit, but on the less than 200 square feet, as well as on these bigger ones, I do not see the need for a 3-foot side yard. I think that is too large. I think 1 foot, especially for the smaller sheds, they are gonna end up 1 foot away.
It used to be one, it used to be 1 foot. Historically, that's what it was.
Even with his proposal, I don't, if he wants to do that, that's cool, but I don't see the advantage of being that far away and having to restrict them so far from using, what I've noticed when people do that, not necessarily you, but it becomes weeds
Yeah.
and not maintained.
It's not big enough to maintain.
So I would prefer to put it in the yard, because you can mow it a lot easier than hide it behind somewhere. And so, as far as the grass, so I personally think that the rear needs to be down to more like rear and side to 1 foot.
Instead of 3
And
foot
that's
wide.
just for the smaller than 200. You're not saying that for the larger ones, or you don't care on the size?
I personally don't care. I think if they need to excavate to do a gigantic one for footings and things like that, they obviously are gonna have to be set back farther just for the constructability of it.
Right.
And so I think 1 foot kind of captures all of it, because if they can't dig on their own property and their neighbor won't let them on their property, it solves that by pushing it into the yard.
I wish I had that when I just built mine. 1
Exactly.
foot would've been nice,
And then
actually.
fire code would come into play at some point too,
Yes.
if there was an adjacent structure. and-
That's what I was
right?
gonna say, is there concern about fire code? Also, I've had,
That's their,
yeah, I've had circumstances where a large structure goes in place and may block the neighbor a little bit more the closer it is to that property line. Are there any considerations of that in this process? So that may be something.
There's height requirements, right? But
Yeah,
that's-
and I-
But that's,
and looking at these, they're not, I mean, it's a 16-foot building on a half acre or smaller, so I don't think we're talking
Sure, so not too
extreme
high.
heights.
Yeah,
The 1 foot thing, the one thing I have thought about that again is because we measure the setback to the wall, we don't want an overhang, obviously, to drop water or anything
Into
onto
the
the
neighbor.
adjacent property.
Yeah.
So we just need to look at that.
So consider that, as well as I also, and I'm just throwing you out things to look into.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The side yard next to dwelling on a corner lot. Corner lot 20 foot, because I own a corner lot, I'll tell you exactly what happens. I have a big corner lot. It's not a half acre, but it's about almost a third. And if you did this, the way it would currently stand, the only garage I could ever put on that corner would be, because of the offset from the house per those requirements, could not be bigger than a 10 by 10.
So I live on a corner lot as well, and I think this.
I think that's too drastic. To be honest, most corner lots have a 10-foot PUE. public utility easement anyway, so I think that's sufficient. You're gonna be off of that anyway. I don't see why 20 feet is so drastic. If you'd like to put it so you can have a basketball court or something, that's
And
up
this
to you.
isn't referring to any sightline requirements or anything. This is just to try to keep it out of sight from two sides, correct?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if it's, okay, I don't have an example. I did put some pictures in here.
There's a corner, right there.
So that's a corner, kind of a weird corner. But I mean, well, for example, in my mind, on this lot, if this is a street on this side, why couldn't he put it right on the property line? You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
that's what I'm saying. In some areas like that, there is a trail right there, and it just does not make sense to be close. I also think we should consider, going back to what the resident commented on, I think we should reference the front of the house. I think it would solve a lot of unique challenges like this.
what do you mean? Say that, say it differently.
Do not let the accessory building pass the front of the house. And I think you could delineate what you mean by front. So if you went back to those pictures that just went by, go back to his example if you don't mind. I think in that case,
On this case,
Front
we
or
would
side.
say, this is the front of the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then what about the side then? Maybe
what I'm saying is, if you maybe you went by whatever the front for this one's probably a little bit different. The front works for the other photo, referring to the front. If I remember right, we had another one when we talked about this where it was kind of down around the corner. It wasn't this one, but it was similar to this.
Yeah,
where
the lot was kind of weird shaped. Yeah.
it was on a cul-de-sac. The house was down in the cul-de-sac, and it made sense.
There's a big spot on the side.
I mean, I personally would rather have people put stuff in garages than store it on the side of their house. And so I really would like to give people the opportunity to build what they want. If they want toys or little projects, I totally understand that, and I think we need to include that. I think we're almost too far to one side where we're not letting people build what they really want. That's why you buy a house, is so you can build what you want. It's not.
Okay, can I ask this a different way?
Yeah.
Are you okay with them being in the front yard?
I have no issue with them being in the front yard.
You're okay with
as
it?
long as it's behind the front of the.
Is
I'm going to say this. I have no problem with them being in front of the front yard. Go back to this gentleman's house. I do not consider I don't consider that his front yard at all.
And that's the problem, is by definition, we have to.
That is the
That's
front
where we
yard.
get stuck,
Yeah.
because I wouldn't either. And we tried to be creative and go, well, this is the side yard.
Yes.
The definition says the front plane of the house, that's the front yard.
But
So
I think
again,
that's
it's-
something we may want to adjust in
that's
reality,
What we gotta think about.
is because that's more important. I mean,
We try to get very creative on these when we go, oh, that makes all the sense in the world to make it work, right? Sometimes we can't think outside the box enough to make it work. So again, that's where whether we can fix the ordinance to cover all the possible scenarios or just create some kind of exception to allow whether staff or you the flexibility to make a different determination, maybe that's what it needs to be.
or, I mean, to me, maybe you say that if you combine the front and the side,
Right.
you could say this one could achieve. If it can't be past the front and the side, it would instantly put it in the box where they probably want it to be. Right?
You don't want it in front of the side, right? You
So-
want it to be set back. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So front and side.
I
in that
think you
instance.
could create it where you don't even need exceptions. I think the
let
reason
me-
why we have so
That might
many
be better,
exceptions is because we have so much detail in this.
You're right.
And I personally think,
Well, let me,
Just relax it a little bit.
I had a thought, Adam. What if the setback was from the road? Because you see where the road is here, if the front setback is from the road, is
Yep.
measured from the road as opposed to the plane of the house.
Because you already have the
then-
setback requirement for the house. It'd be
Well, and that would be the
25
issue.
feet.
So
and
for example, on this one, that was the issue. If you wanted to put it up here,
Yeah, you.
that's his front yard. Because again, if I gotta go front plane of the house,
But then the
that's the front
setback, the
yard.
setback would be off of the road.
but if you put a setback off the road, yeah, that may be a different
so
way
if you
to
tied
define
it, if you did that, if you tied it where, if it was off the front, the road side, the main access side, front of the house, you go with whatever setback the house is, right? And I think that's all we need to say. I don't think we need to have a foot, 25 feet. I think you just say if the house is 30 feet, that's what the frontage off the road. I don't consider the hammerhead in their case the road. I think that is a temporary turnaround.
It's probably a fire lane turnaround.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So to me, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not that. I mean, technically, if you go back to theirs, the fire code and everything says that they could technically put the house right next to that turnaround, and the fire company would be completely happy, and not. They could have a structure right there. So to me, I don't see why we have to restrict it being further back. So I think tying it off the road is sufficient.
Is there any distinction in this between something like a tool shed versus a garage? So
The only thing
is
is
there concern of, hey, you
agricultural.
can throw a little cheap tool shed up in the front of my house, and concern with the neighbors or so forth, versus actually building a garage?
So me personally, again, on that same argument, if they are that junky that they want to do that, I think it would be better than having them sitting on the grass.
That's
and
true.
so,
That's true.
So personally, I think that's what we're limiting. Is I'm sure you guys have desire to put this shed in, and you just can't. I think we're limiting people from doing what they really want to do, and I think by doing that, it's making people not do anything or choosing to.
And what we do a lot of times that we don't ever want to do right is, so if it's less than 200 square feet, they don't need a building permit, right? So a lot of times they call and we go, at the end of the day, doesn't matter where they put it. But why do I want to say that? I'd rather be able to say,
Correct.
You're allowed to do this than to have them try and
I know
skirt the
exactly because
issue,
I have
right?
a 199
That happens all the
and a
time.
half square foot shed.
Yeah.
I do completely agree. I know what you mean. So, but that's
Want to
the-
make it easier for people.
But that's
yeah.
exactly what I'm saying. Is it just doesn't make sense. I think the 200 square feet makes sense for a permit. It's starting to get substantial. We want somebody to look at it. That's different than where we want to put it. I don't think that that's why I don't really, the foot buffer, I've seen it too far where people, when they get 3 to 8 feet buffers, they start to actually just have more junk there. And really, it becomes what we do not want than a structure that looks close to the house and makes everybody happy. Most people, even neighbors, will never get that upset. Now, if the roof pitch starts to get higher than the house, that's when people get upset. I've been involved with the city long enough that that's typically when people get upset. It's nothing to do with, hey, they're putting a shed next to my house. I personally wish more people put sheds next to my house because then I don't have to see their house.
So let me ask you a question about this lot, for example. If this is the front yard, and they want to put it, and they're gonna fence it like this, kind of something like this.
Because they got a lot of front yard and they were trying to
And so
put it into a
They
backyard.
want to put this kind of garage right here.
So do we say it's
8
set
feet off
back?
the property line, basically. 5 feet off the property line, off the sidewalk.
See, that's the front line, so to me.
Right. So that's what I'm just asking. I want to make sure I understand so that I know what we're trying to write.
Well, we could write it as this far off the road or behind a 6-foot fence. If a 6-foot fence is allowed,
Then do it.
then do it.
Right.
I think
So
if it's
Matt,
behind a fence, I really don't care.
If it's behind a 6-foot fence,
Put it a foot off the fence and go. I'm good.
And that's kind of how I feel on the corner lot as well, right? I mean, even
Yeah,
if there's
if the
a street
6-foot
right here,
fence
if
is
there's a
allowed.
fence, why do I
Right.
care if it's right there?
Right.
Yeah.
And for me personally, for aesthetic reasons, if this was a streetscape, I wouldn't want a bunch of garages pushing up close to the front and ruining a whole line of nice houses. And now you got this big garage that's shoved out towards the front of the street.
But I
Even
don't-
if there was a fence in the way, just driving down, that would be a turnoff for me. So in that way, I'd almost want to have some kind of exemption process to approve something like that.
But I think personally, I think that's so one in a miss that it's one house. Okay. I mean,
This type of lot is not,
it's
Sure.
not, that is
Yeah.
not going to be,
Right.
Yeah.
because I agree, I wouldn't want to see a bunch of sitting closer. What if there was a house, if there's a house right here that's sitting back here, again, that would look really
but going
odd.
back to what I said earlier, there is no way a house will ever be able to go where you just described. Because there is typically, and I need the city engineer to correct me, there is always a utility line along the frontage of every lot.
Right, do you know how easy it is to get that waived?
Not if there's a gas line like in this one, there's probably a gas line along the front.
In the front line, you're correct, there is a real one that's 10 feet.
The backs are easy to get
The back is
waived.
different, you're right.
The fronts, especially on a corner, there is, I guarantee, either a gas or a power line. I can't see
it's
it
at
from
least
this
10
photo,
feet. You're
but
right.
my hunch is, based off the green box that's over by the trail, there's a power line going through there somewhere.
There's always an easement.
So,
Often
and I know the utilities would never go away from a front
Right.
or a corner utility easement because they want it in case of the future. So that would solve your streetscape idea.
Yeah,
So basically, if we just said, stay out of the public utility easement, we don't even need to worry about it.
And I would honestly prefer to say that because I hate telling people, well, it's 3 feet, but you can do 5 feet, but it's really 6 feet because there's a utility easement. So, but if you get waivers, then you can do 3. You know what I mean?
So I think if you
It's
just
really
say,
complicated to explain to people.
you just say setback 1 foot from the fence or property line. Property line, I think, is
Which
really
they
what
still
it is.
have to get waivers for.
1 foot from the property line and out of the PUE. I really think you almost capture,
Well, one more, and then or behind a fence too.
yes.
It needs to be behind a fence, or in this instance, you would want to have them
Or behind a
match.
fence and behind a fence. I mean, I think it's an
And behind a
not both.
fence, or you need to match at least the setback from the front of the house.
Because in their
At that point.
example, even, maybe you tie it to the fence, because if you go back to their photo, if you tied it to a fence, they probably, my
put a
guess,
side
they are
fence.
going to probably put a side fence. It looks like there's already one there, right?
Yeah.
The fence here?
No, coming
No.
off the side
Do you
of
have
the
anything
house,
coming across
off the
the
side
front?
yard. No, the corner of the house,
Go about where the green dot is on this map.
Over here?
right?
Draw a line. See where the corner of their house is? No, other way. Go down.
Stop it.
Down. Okay. See that off to the left where the grass
The edge of the
is?
grass, between the
Right
grass,
here.
that
If-
right there.
What is that? Okay.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is we could call that a fence. If they put in a fence there and it was
So-
behind that fence,
You can't have a 6-foot fence in the front yard.
I didn't say it had to be, I guess, I'm just saying a fence.
I would say 6 foot.
I would say 6
I
foot
think you
fence.
gotta say 6
But I
feet,
think in this
otherwise
case, you
But
could
that's not the
say,
front yard.
we can call,
It is the front yard. I know.
can we call,
Ordinance,
we
but it
talked
is.
about offset from whatever the street is.
Right.
Versus match the front setback from wherever the street is. In this case, we could be creative and say, well, the street turns, it's a 90
This is the
degree,
street,
so now this becomes the street in this plane and it's 25 feet off or whatever it is.
I-
And then define. So, I think there's a way.
I think this definition is front yard is what we need to work on to solve this.
Or you say front and side.
Yeah. If you said front and
If you say
side.
behind the front and side, that would almost, it's always an and. In that instance, you would be,
Does that get
you'd be
confusing?
behind the
Does-
front and the side yard.
Yep.
How does that work of, what does it behind the side yard mean? Does that mean in a corner lot, or is that, I mean, if I have a normal square house, how am I getting behind the side yard? It's just a little confusing language that
Yeah.
may need to be tweaked.
The front or the front and side.
You call it the usable front yard, and that is the grass area that they're calling your grass, to be honest. Because my hunch is they're gonna put a little bit more concrete off that apron, have a little basketball court or something for their kids, and then put a shed. I think they should be
We
able to
feel your
do it.
pain.
Am I guessing? So, that's where I think we should really lighten this up, and maybe you make it so small that it's really pretty simple. Because especially, and then I only talked about the A1s, especially in the R1s, I've seen it. They have no backyard already. Their backyard is like 12 by 15,
In the R2s, really.
and
Yeah.
or anything small.
Yeah.
Mixed uses, you name it.
Right.
And we're seeing the little tough sheds pop up everywhere. And that's because they have no other place to store their lawnmower because their garages are too small. So we need them to have that comfort. I don't think it even makes sense for you to get a call on, do I have to be 3 feet away? A foot? Go for it. And then the roof overhang dripping thing, technically tough sheds don't even have an overhang.
And that's what, I don't know, I
So
just
to
wanna
me,
make
as
sure that's
long
not
as
an
you
issue.
went off of, I don't think that'd ever be an issue. I really don't. Because if the structure gets big enough, and I'll ask the architects on this side
But
of the
again, are
room.
you just saying tough shed, or are you saying anything?
I'm saying
Maybe
if the structure gets big enough to have an overhang, to construct it, to physically get a track hoe in or a backhoe in to dig the footing, you're gonna have to slide the
But
shed
that's
over.
not what people ask me. They're gonna come in with a site plan for a building permit and say, 1 foot. It's not until they go to build it, are they gonna realize that they need more room. You
And
know,
they'll slide
it
a foot
just-
and a half.
People don't think that way.
But then they'll slide a foot and a half, problem solved.
So just say a foot from the, and then if they do
Or
have
they won't,
the
their neighbor
edge-
will say, what are you doing? And they'll say, well, the city told me I could put it right here.
Foot from the.
Will we say foot from
Foot
overhang?
from
From any
edge of
improvement.
roof.
No.
Foot
Yeah,
from
from
the
edge of roof. You can't say
But
that.
that's not how we measure any setback, and I don't wanna change it.
No, we measure it from face of building.
That's good,
We
because that's
always
the way I
measure
did
from
my
the
shed.
wall.
What's that?
I said that's good, because that's the way I did mine.
That's just what you want to tell us, right?
Well, I'm just,
Let us do some work on it.
okay.
Yeah.
I think you get my.
I think you do front, match the setback of the front yard, or the front and back combination. Then you're,
Yeah. I personally do like the percentages of no more than 25% of your rear yard. I do think that makes sense to constrain people from becoming
Covering their rear yard?
100%
Yeah.
garage.
And am I right,
Yeah.
Craig, because I don't remember, did we get
I
rid
know
of
I
the
would like
size?
it, but I don't think it'd look good.
Because it used to be 800 square feet up to 25%, but are we getting rid of the 800 square feet, is that what we're saying?
we are getting rid, because.
just giving you a straight
it's something that was
percentage.
granted
Okay.
automatically. as a
Right, so why are we
conditional
talking about
use.
it? Yeah.
And I just think we just never say bigger than, I think a max is great. I just don't think
Just
we
say
need to
up
worry
to
about anything
25%,
else.
however you do it. And then one of the things we talked about, is what is 25% of what yard?
Oh, my goodness.
I know. I'm telling you, this is why this stuff is,
Why don't you
Because
just take a
if-
picture of this and draw like a little schematic
well,
that
we
says
just, that's what you just
yard,
said.
not yard.
We may want to just draw a couple diagrams and put them in the ordinance that way.
That's what I'm saying.
That's not a bad
weird
idea.
lot like this, a typical corner and a typical,
But even
just
on a
say
normal
yard and not
lot-
yard.
On a normal lot, you could have 12 feet on one side and want to put a tough shed there.
Uh-huh.
Do I, but what the ordinance says is 25% of the rear yard. It doesn't even say side yard, front yard, it says the rear yard.
That's right.
Should it say 25% of your total yard? Should it say side plus rear yard? Should it say 25% of the yard that you're in? So if you're in the front yard, is it 25% of the front yard?
25% combined side and rear, you've got that there.
And that's what we added was 25% of the combined side and
combined.
rear because
How about you just say no bigger than the house?
it already says that. It's supposed to say that. Does it
solved.
still say that? It can't be bigger than the footprint of the house.
Then that, I mean, that's pretty dang, I mean, honestly, that's gonna solve 90% of them. And then on the big ones that are out in the farm country, you tie it to a percentage, it's not an issue. If you just said that, there is no way that, we gotta be real, it's gonna be
It's always
so
a way,
rare.
so don't, yeah.
It will be so near impossible to construct. This house that they're looking at is a fairly large house. They won't be able to get it and stay away from the house with building code
So
requirements.
can I ask you a question? How many square feet is your house just on the one level?
This,
Just on the main level,
Main
how many
level.
square feet is
what
it?
you're looking at right here,
But including the garage.
what,
Yeah, including the garage.
this view you're seeing right here,
That's about what I was gonna guess.
And then the garage for 9, 30 by 30-ish. So, I mean,
So they could
that
basically
is
build one
a,
that size.
I'm serious, that's
that's a huge.
huge garage.
Do you wanna
Nobody,
let it be-
huh?
Do you wanna let it be that big? Do you wanna say that instead of saying 25% coverage? Is that what you're trying to say?
saying no bigger than the house. The total,
I think we still have to have a coverage.
it
because-
would never
because-
happen.
It'll happen.
I don't know. I'm
gonna
honest.
play
The
this
only
meeting for you when it
the only
happens.
areas it could happen on the small postage size lots, it won't happen because they physically don't have enough yard to worry about. On the huge lots, the only ones you'd have to worry about are the ones that are 5 acres, but they're not going to have itty bitty houses on them. If you just tied to this,
Well, on a 5-acre lot, if you're doing, if you end up with 4-acre backyard, that means you can build a 1-acre building.
not if you tie it to.
You're 25%.
Yeah, but
Not
see,
if,
on-
that's
on
what I'm
an
saying.
agricultural
If you
lot-
tie it to,
On an agricultural lot, we're never gonna do that, because their buildings are always gonna be way bigger than their
let's go
houses.
with a 1 acre. We got those in Rose Creek.
Right.
They're not agricultural. They could want to have lots of toys. In Rose Creek, there are houses that are already there that they're not bigger than 2,000 square feet, probably on the main. Plus a garage. If you even go with 3-car, you're only going to be max. You're at 3,000 square feet.
Okay.
You're not going to get. There's just you don't need. You're going to run out of space. You might as well use it. Just tie it to the house. Garage can't be bigger than the house, ever.
The footprint of the house.
Except for in the farm area, footprint of the house. And you'd never have to worry about it. No percentage, no nothing. Because if I built too small of a house, now I can't get a big garage. That's what I would consider. Yeah. I think the percentages
I don't like it for a lot of reasons, but I will think about it.
when we did the percentage, I remember why we did it. The percentage was tied because we were worried about 15 little sheds. So
We wanted
you had
a kind of a
the chicken coop, you had
congregate
this, you
enough.
had this, you had this, and so we wanted to make sure you didn't have too much. But I don't know, I just think we need to let people start doing it,
And sometimes,
because we're doing it
I
anyway.
agree with that in concept. It becomes hard in practice when somebody comes in and says, how big can I build? It doesn't always translate well, I guess is what I'm saying. Sometimes a number is easier to give people. Sometimes that makes more sense to them. And we can easily go on our map and go, your backyard's that many square feet, here's 25% of that.
I mean, really, maybe we just say no bigger than 5,000 square foot. I mean, really, that's gonna be near impossible for most people to build, even to fit it on a lot
Right.
with their house there. Even on a huge lot, I don't see that they're gonna have.
Okay, let us work on that. What else you got?
That's all I have. That's
You said
it.
you had something in the agricultural, was that it?
I was just saying in agricultural, I think percentage makes sense there because you could have a big running.
Even 5-acre piece, you could have
You
big
could have a-
barns and stuff like that.
And if they wanna have a big arena, I don't see why we care.
That's why they buy an agricultural lot.
Exactly.
right.
And if they can afford that in this economy, they deserve it.
They just are.
All right, anything else for Brennan, Craig?
I think, do you have any other questions, Craig? Is that, you feel like you have direction?
Yeah, I think I do, actually.
I mean, I think everybody looks at this and goes, they should be able to put that there. We're just trying to figure out how to,
Yeah.
how to get there.
I like the idea of a schematic saying what yard and what's yard
And
and what's
maybe we
front
do
yard.
that.
And then you don't have to
Use
worry
Throw a
them as
about
an
couple images
example.
in there, yeah, drawings
only,
in there.
there's only like 4 or 5 types of lots we would really have in
And we've
general.
run across them in the last 6 months, so we know where they are, what they look like.
You will be in an ordinance, just.
All names will be changed to protect the innocent. so
They
you'll
don't
find
care as
out.
long as they can build it.
I have a hunch it's a source of contention.
Okay, did we have a public hearing on that? Yeah, we did.
We closed it.
Yeah, it's closed. All right,
Motion on that
Motion?
one?
I motion to continue without date.
hey,
Second.
motion by Adam, second by Andy. Adam,
Yes.
Andrea,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes?
Lauren,
Yes.
and Harry.
Yes.
Thank you, and that is continued. Item 3.2, a text change to Land Development Code, Chapter 16, Table of Uses. And this is also on for a public hearing.
Okay. Chapter 16, Table of Uses. So we adopted an entirely new land development code in December. This Table of Uses was one of the new things we added. Some of you will remember. We took all of the uses out of the zones, put them into one table to make it look awesome and easier. At the time, we knew that we needed to make some changes and do some real revisions to it, but it was way more time-consuming, so we kind of pushed it off to do it separately, so that's what you have now. We have had several work meetings on this table and gone over it. These are the changes, I mean, look at that thing. These are the changes, again, based on my notes of all of our meetings, and all the things we talked about. So I am not gonna go over these line by line. I will point out a couple of them. One of the things we talked about is our consultant grouped the animals and fowl together and then had a footnote, and it was like all footnoted differently. I didn't like it that way. I wanted it to be a little more broken out. So we broke it out to family food production because that is what we define it as. And then we have the backyard chickens allowed in the residential zones. Again, family food is in the agricultural zones. And then we have these 3 different animal permits. And because of the way they're referenced in other places, I want people to just be able to come here and go, it's that one, and not think it's under animal and fowl, and it's a broader category, so.
So does that mean you can't have chickens in your backyard if you live in an 8.25?
You can under family food production. See, right there.
But Okay.
Under family food production, you can have 40 chickens.
You just can have more.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying.
Backyard chickens is a defined thing
For the smaller lot
for the
size.
residential zones
Gotcha.
where they can have 6 chickens. kind
I'm
of
good
thing.
now. I
Yeah.
caught up.
So they're two totally different kind of things.
Cool.
Family food production is goats and horses and all of that they can have.
Cool.
So we separated those out. The home occupation was under commercial, which I didn't like, so I moved it up with the residential uses. And then again, the home daycares are different because their requirements are a little bit different, so it gave them their own line item. And we,
Did
well-
we remove that out of multifamily?
yeah, let's talk about this. So the home occupations are permitted. These are the ones that they just get to do. The daycares and the preschools are still conditional uses that we have to review.
I would like to, in multifamily areas, to not even have daycares as a
We
condition.
added all of that to say, I mean, there's language that got added in there. Hold on, which one's RM?
Oh, the driveway issue, we solved that with text?
We solved the driveway
Okay.
issue with the text.
Then I'm fine.
So if it's a shared driveway of any kind, they can't do it. The one thing we talked about here, which has now created an entirely different thing we're gonna bring you, kind of like the accessory buildings chapter, is the home occupation stuff kind of got put in like 3 different spots. And again, we're struggling because you find it in one spot and go, oh, that's it, and then there's another section. So we will bring you back a home occupation chapter that combines all of that stuff into one spot. The one thing we talked about, maybe it was last time or 2 meetings ago, was the daycare preschool doesn't really talk about the dance lessons or tumbling lessons in the home. So those technically then fall under the permitted and don't have to meet the same kind of requirements as like the daycares. And they probably should.
Yes.
So we're gonna change that. We talked a little bit about maybe changing it to instruction, or if it's more than 10 kids, then it falls under this kind of a thing. So we're still,
That's in the definition of those.
it'll be kind of more in the definition of what that is.
The
So
table
again,
won't change, it'll just be definitions of what.
Or you'll make a,
it'll probably be both.
You'll
It'll
make a
probably
new
change in the
line.
table,
Another line.
and then it will change in the
Okay.
home occupation chapter. Again, we're not showing you any of that now because we started this. We looked at a lot of different cities' home occupation stuff, and it is all over the place. All over the place. The one way I kind of liked, they looked at, and this came up because we had somebody came in who wanted to do tumbling classes, 4 sessions a day, 10 kids a session. We're like,
Wow.
but there was really no way, it's kind of a loophole there at this point, so we need to fix it. One of the cities I looked at does it based on trips, which I thought may be a way to do it too,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
For students.
that
So,
makes sense.
because if it's 1 or 2 trips a day, again, there's very low impact to that. So again, we'll bring you back that as a separate chapter. Trying to think if there's anything else here. We changed. Again, that's just removing the home occupations and moving them up. I mean, you'll see again, little changes all through here. And these were all based on our notes of our meetings. So, we removed a lot of like the heavy industry. We had talked about that. And some of the wholesale warehousing, we limited a little bit more. So again, any huge things you see that we're missing, any changes you'd like to see?
I'm good.
Comments,
I really,
questions?
I personally just think that solving the dance studio thing needs to be
Yeah.
done before we permit home occupations. Straight up.
Well, and it's already, it's already is that way. That's not a change.
I know.
It's, I mean, and again, to get back on that for a second, there is something in there that talks about maintaining the residential character, and if the traffic or noise, creates an issue, then we can
I almost
deny it.
I
But just
almost
needed that to be
wonder.
a little more clear.
I almost wonder if, like, home occupations where a person, has their their workers come and then they go out and do a job and then come back. I personally don't have an issue with that. It's when they're bringing customers to their house. that you start to get into it. It's like kids or preschool or the daycare or the
Exactly.
dances.
A lot of times with the
Or
photo
nail salons
studios,
or hair cutting or anything.
I almost
salons
wonder
are
if
really not that big of a deal. It's one person at a time typically, so it's not,
It's different, that's what I'm saying.
So
again,
what
it's
I'm
all
wondering-
different levels of traffic, right?
So what I'm wondering is if we tied it to businesses that bring customers to your house. If you bring a customer, even if it's one person, you have to do a conditional use. But if you don't bring customers to your house, then you might as well be permitted. If you're just
Well,
an
and that's
insurance
basically how it
guy
is
that wants
now.
to run something out of your house, that I don't see why
That-
we
that's-
even need to waste
that's-
anybody's time.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're not allowed to have employees in any situation, really.
Good theory.
Unless we approve they're not called special home occupations anymore, but that's what they are. If you have an acre in agricultural zone, then you can have employees come, you can do a little bit different thing, but, so again, I don't wanna talk about it now. We're gonna come back and have a home occupation conversation. Cool. Because I think that again, the more we work through this, the more kind of tweaks we wanna make. The one thing I know about daycares as opposed to 4 tumbling lessons a day is daycare, a couple kids get dropped off here and there, a couple kids get picked up here and there. If you had 10 kids come for tumbling at 9 and get picked up at 10 and then 10 more, it would be a tremendous amount of traffic. It would be tremendous. So again, I think trips may be a way to look at it. We'll have to look at how, some other cities have some kind of creative ways of
We
doing
had
it.
one like that where we approved it, but we made sure it was offset. Instead of
Yeah.
9 to 10 and then 10 to 11, we made sure
Yeah.
she didn't start on the hour.
Which would be a number of trips per.
Yeah.
And maybe it's number of sessions. Most all preschools only do 2 sessions, morning and afternoon. So maybe it's something about that, no more than 20 trips a day or 2 sessions a day. Or again, we're doing more looking at that. So this is on for a public hearing. If this is fine, you could approve it and send it to council if you want to. Like I said, I think the home occupation conversation is going to be a longer thing. We will also be bringing you changes in the next couple months on some of the alcohol-related uses. We've talked about a little bit, so,
And
but
that'll
again,
be
we're
in
not
the-
dealing with those today.
But needs to be added to the table.
Yeah.
So we're gonna.
Because there's none really in there today, so we just need
So
to,
your goal would be to approve what we have today, and then as changes come, we'll amend it
Yeah.
and make updates at that time.
yeah.
Good to me.
Great.
So this is on for a public hearing. Anybody wishing to make comment, please come to the mic and state your name for the record. Okay, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. All right, any more discussion on this item?
I had one quick question just for Bren. So if something's not listed on the table, it's
Not allowed.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
Motion to approve item 3.
I had one quick question before we
Okay.
get that one. This probably, I don't know if this is the right place to ask it, but is this talk about dwelling for a short stay, as in Airbnb?
We don't have anything on that, do we?
I don't think we have that on here.
We don't allow them, and shouldn't be on here anywhere. There's a definition of it, but they're not allowed.
Okay, so it's just under short-term rental, not allowed, period? Okay,
Today, they're not allowed, period, yeah.
okay.
You could change it if you wanted to, but they're not allowed today.
Okay,
And this doesn't change that. They've never been allowed, so that's not a change.
okay,
They've never been allowed. Yeah.
okay. I just didn't see it in the chart, that's all. All right, sorry. Go ahead.
Motion to approve item 3.2, text change to the Land Development Code, Chapter 16, Table of Uses.
Second.
Hold on, that's an approval to city council.
Approval to send to City
Recommended
Council.
approval.
Yeah, so you make a recommendation, and then it goes to city council for final approval.
Recommended approval to city council.
Recommended approval to City Council.
All right,
Good
so
job.
motion by Perry and a second by Lauren.
Does that include the home occupation, or is that being,
That'll come back. We'll do a whole
More
new
details on that
chapter.
will come back.
so approved minus the home occupation? Is that-
No, we're
No, we're still
approving
approving it
this.
just the
Approving
way
the
this
table
is.
as is.
We're approving, but then they're gonna come back with more on the home occupation.
The ordinance is already in place like this.
This
This
is
is
what
just
it
a
is,
table that's summarizing what the ordinance
Okay,
says.
okay,
And where they can be.
thank you.
Okay. Harry?
Vote.
Yes?
Okay, thank you. Lauren?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Okay, Andy?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
And Adam?
Yes, and good job.
Thanks. All right, and that's a recommendation.
All in all, that was good. Thank you.
Oh, to city council. Okay, item 4. Any comments by the commission tonight? Okay, all right, our future meetings. Planning Commission is on August 2nd at 7 p.m. And then the next city council is on Wednesday, August 8th at 7 p.m. Get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Andy,
Second.
second by Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Okay. Good job. You guys got it.
I just thought you were.
Oh my
Split
God.
up next time.
Sorry for making that.
Brent, we didn't get a sign in today.
I wrote it.
I didn't understand that
forgot
last
to
one.
sign it by
No, it's